The meeting was scheduled for 15 minutes, which told me everything before it started. My manager kept his jacket on, chair tilted back slightly, laptop closed. He didn't need notes. He already knew the outcome. I'd asked for a raise after 3 years without one, after absorbing responsibilities that had once belonged to 2 different people. I'd framed it conservatively. Market adjustment. Retention. Boring words meant to keep things calm. He skimmed my email on his phone while I talked. "No," he said finally, not harshly, casually, like he was declining a second cup of coffee. I waited. Sometimes no is followed by a reason. He smiled then, not wide, not cruel, just confident. "Look," he said, "if you quit, I'll replace you by Friday." It wasn't a threat. It was a fact, delivered with the ease of someone who believed it. I nodded. I thanked him for his time. I went back to my desk and finished the report I'd been working on, the one that required checking 3 vendor portals and manually reconciling data because no one else knew how the systems talked to each other. I didn't quit, not that day. What shifted wasn't my workload. It was my posture. For years, I'd been solving problems before they surfaced, answering questions before they were asked, translating technical messes into clean summaries so leadership never had to sit in confusion. None of that was in my job description. It was just easier than watching things break. That week, I did exactly what my role required. Nothing more, no informal check-ins, no quiet fixes at 6 p.m., no translating assumptions into reality. On Monday, my manager announced loudly, performatively, that we'd be cross-training to reduce single points of failure. 2 contractors were looped into my workflows. Bright people. Motivated. Underinformed. I answered their questions carefully and accurately, but I stopped filling in the gaps they didn't know existed. When they asked why a process took so long, I told them the documented steps. When they missed a dependency, I let it miss. By Wednesday, the first vendor email came in marked urgent. A delivery window had been misunderstood. A contract clause buried specific had been violated. Normally, I'd have caught it weeks earlier and quietly adjusted. This time, I forwarded it to my manager and waited. He replied asking if I could jump on a quick call to smooth things over. I was in a meeting, a real one. I told him I'd be free later. The call happened without me. It went badly. By Thursday, there were 3 vendors asking for clarification on terms that contradicted each other. The contractors tried to help. They didn't know which promises were enforceable and which were historical habits dressed up as policy. My manager's confidence began to thin. He started asking questions in Slack instead of statements. He asked if I had any insight into why things were suddenly unstable. I answered what was asked, nothing more. Day 5 was when legal appeared. An email chain landed in my inbox with more recipients than I'd ever seen on a single thread. Words like exposure and liability replaced urgency. A vendor had formally escalated. Someone had noticed that our internal documentation didn't match our contractual obligations. Legal asked who owned the vendor relationships. No one answered for several minutes. Then my manager tagged me. I joined the call late, intentionally. Not dramatically, just after it had already begun. The legal counsel asked me to walk through the vendor structure. I did, calmly, precisely, using language that made it clear this wasn't institutional knowledge. It was operational memory. When I finished, there was a pause, the kind that signals recalibration. The conversation shifted tone, not apologetic. Assessing, I wasn't praised. I was reclassified from replaceable to risky to lose. After the call, my manager messaged me privately. He asked if we could revisit the compensation conversation. He didn't mention Friday. I didn't respond right away. That night, I went home and sat on my couch longer than usual, thinking about how tired I was. Not from the week, but from the years before it. From carrying systems no one acknowledged because they didn't know they existed. The next morning, I replied. I asked for a formal role review, documented responsibilities, and compensation aligned with them. I asked for it in writing. The raise came through 2 weeks later. Substantial, clean, professional. I accepted it, and then I updated my RA summary. The power didn't flip dramatically. No one was fired. My manager didn't apologize. He became careful around me, which was its own kind of admission. What changed was internal. I stopped confusing endurance with value. I stopped offering unpaid insurance against other people's assumptions. I stayed long enough to hand things over properly, to make sure the systems could survive without me. Then I left on my own timeline, with references that suddenly spoke fluently about my impact. Being replaceable is a story companies tell themselves to stay comfortable. Sometimes all it takes is a week of silence to see what was really holding things together.